Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we are finally going to be talking about the comeback album from Daughters, You Won't Get What You Want. Not gonna mince words, these are the reviews that always give me some pause when I put them together. Not that I didn't know what I was getting into. I've gone back through Daughter's entire back catalog, it didn't really take long, but it's always a bit daunting when you see so many critics praise an act so highly, especially based upon qualifiers that can be kinda subjective to say the least. Granted, since we're talking about Daughters, might as well open up with a conversation that'll inevitably happen whenever anybody talks about this group, namely, what in the nine hells they even are. Going into their first album, you could conceivably call them experimental grindcore with the extremely short songs, the scream vocals, and the guitars that sound like buzzsaws and power drills going through your skull, but the next two releases, they did not stick in that lane, venturing into noise rock and industrial music with a sort of intentionally grotesque wildness that, if you were familiar with their genre, could seem a little bit more accessible and experimental, showing the band diversify and expand their sound. And if you weren't familiar with their genres, you were in the corner curled up in the fetal position. Now, this is a band that operates on violent noise and alienating the audience, and you need to be in the right mindset for that. But if you can clue into that mindset, I never really call myself a huge fan, but I thought their artistic direction had a lot of potential, and I would have been curious for a reunion before now, 8 years after they broke up after their self-titled album that many considered their final album, and honestly has aged better than I expected. But now they're back, and the critics who love this style of abrasion, they really love this album, so I was gearing up for one hell of a listen, even if the album's title seemed to promise otherwise. But alright, fuck it. What do we get from You Won't Get What You Want? Alright, here's the thing. I haven't talked about a project like You Won't Get What You Want in some time. An album that isn't specifically designed to entertain you or to be all that fun, at least not in a conventional sense, and especially when you start digging into the lyrical details and the themes. Now, the most immediate and striking comparison point that I came to, especially on a thematic level, is the Flaming Lips' excellent and absolutely terrifying 2013 album, The Terror, an album that was designed to put forward an unsettling existential truth and push the audience to the very limits in alien territory. Now, Daughters, they take a similar route with this project, except they hit with a variety of disconcerting ideas, all centered around a brand of desperate nihilism that absolutely embodies the album's title. And if that sort of thing is up your speed, and spoilers, for me, it definitely can be, this was a tense, genuinely unnerving listen that might be Daughters' most accessible album to date, but it's using that accessibility to really get under your skin and leave you a trembling, exhausted wreck. And all spoilers, it's one of the best albums of 2018 for the record. Now, some of this might mean evaluating the appeal is a little bit different than most. Again, to put it bluntly, it's not exactly fun, nor is it really designed to be. But the devious trick of Daughters is that for as bleak as this album can feel, it's not using the same tricks as the Flaming Lips did with The Terror and using warped song structures to make the listener feel a little uneven or off their balance. It's actually trying to be a little bit more catchy, and some of the perverse genius is for as discordant as the jangling, roiling swells can be, there's still a melodic core to some of these progressions that are designed to get in your head. There are layers here with real hooks and some veneer of accessibility if you know industrial music, providing you can tolerate the blaring howl of it all. Yeah, the guitars might keen and wail across twisted chords, and the bass might build some roiling crunch here, but when it's not falling apart in agonized, stuttering breakdowns, the percussion, it does keep a steady rhythm. And frontman Alexis Marshall, he's not screaming or engaging in the Nick Cave circa birthday party impression he had been working years ago. And in a sense, that might be an inspired move. Not playing somebody who can command or ride the dark tides like Nick Cave or Michael Gira, but the man just as caught up within the brutal, unsteady rhythms, which is that much more relatable, that much more terrifying. And in a sense, that lack of a central commanding anchor point amidst all the noise makes it feel that much more imposing and implacable. From moments of slow-building menace like City Psalm doubling down on loneliness and whispered fear, and Daughter tipping off the deeper melody and consistent rhythm into some really unstable horror. Hell, all the way to the return of the manic power drill guitar tone on the Lord song, where the desperate vocals, they're audible, but on the cusp of getting just subsumed completely. And in one of my few nitpicks, that power drill guitar tone, it's one of the few elements carried over from their earlier years that I've just never quite gotten into. Like on a cut like Flammable Man and Guest House, or how it slips into Daughter and the reason why they hate me. Especially when I think that Daughters, they get often so much more menace and power out of the usage of more melodies, or at least ones that are a little more distinctive from that weedier lane. From the hollow, jingering blues of Less Sex to the hammering industrial grind of Long Road No Turns that's confident enough to hit some breathing moments where the guitar peels across the mix like an organ, to the hammered two-note oscillations that creep with gothic majesty over Satan in the Wait. Or hell, when Daughters knocks into a killer groove like they do in the Gallop of the Reason They Hate Me, or Ocean Psalm, or Guest House, really the end of the album, that power drill guitar tone, it almost doesn't even matter as the primal fear crashes in and the melody is allowed to cascade into fouler territory over some longer runtimes. Or in the case of Guest House, use the as much heavier pounding, bombastic groove, that primal force, to break into an ambiguous, remarkably elegant outro where nothing is left completely certain. But it's no soothing moment either. You know, even if it comes to a slightly brighter resolution, it's not gonna last. And that's where the content comes into the picture. And you know, I gotta give Daughters a lot of credit for the sheer breadth of unsettling ways to instill panic and fear that don't default to sheer brutal shock tactics. This is an album that wants to prey on subtle anxieties and creeping dread. Less the monster you know is there, and more perpetuating the feeling that there's one around every corner that you can't see, and you can't quite trust your own perception that it's not there, because it could be there. Right. I mean, City Song is the most obvious example in order to set the scene, but the open attack on expectations continues from there. Long Road No Turns goes straight into the loaded implications that everybody's fallen apart. We all might take a little bit of pleasure in somebody else's pain, as it seems like they're hitting the ground slightly harder, but that's not really filling the void within you, is it? And even the words behind the song, they aren't theirs, and they're not yours either. It makes the seduction of demonic forces on Satan in the Wait kind of ingenious, as a creature's ugliness show how it's been snubbed and ignored, how pitiful it really is. But when someone wants something or leaves themselves just open enough, and they're getting more open all the time, the option creeps in before they even realize it. But even then, on a narrative level, this isn't a grand tragedy of errors. This is the pitiful subversion of people who are too blind or too stupid or too self-obsessed to realize something that they could have so easily cast aside. It's more obvious in the Lord's Psalm, but it's just as pointed there. Somebody who has every comfort but still left to cry and remain unsatisfied, analogous to the mantra of less sex and the paranoia of the flammable man. Hell, if there's a cogent theme through any of this, it's how when isolated and left to ourselves, humanity's irrationality curdles inwards into breakdowns. They don't make dramatic sense, but they're all the more terrifying for their reality and how inevitable they might seem. It's the embrace of the pointless, the toxic, the self-destructive, the little moments of catharsis that open up to disaster, or at the very least expectations that will never ever be met. It's one reason why there's some real sting to Daughter, which takes a metaphorical build around an artist's creative process to venture back on the road to reclaim some missed opportunities they think they could have, a trudge that will never really satisfy in the end, because they gotta get back on that road every time. It's why there's a song where they lash out at those who criticize them on the reason they hate me, as those who have never lived and think they know better, which becomes a bearing of their own insecurities along the way, and kind of ironic given how many critics have embraced this project. But it is certainly fitting that our final two songs show our protagonist losing all control and charging into the ocean of naked, dangerous possibilities that they should know better than to enter, or fighting for their way into a house that is not their own, enraged, maddened, but craven and desperately seeking a satisfaction that will never come. It's one reason why the album kind of has to end ambiguously, thus giving those like me that at the end none of that satisfaction of ever really knowing what was found at the end, or a reassuring balm that the door was ever truly opened, or that something was found inside. So yeah, I'm sure the band can appreciate the irony of, despite Daughters titling the album You Won't Get What You Want, across the board it delivers a sort of consistency, thematic nuance, and powerfully unsettling core that was exactly what I wanted and appreciated, especially given how much thematic density there is. And when you have that dense and dissonant power, but melodic and hook-driven all the same, crushing and implacable, but altogether very human and desperate, this is the sort of album that is so well designed to never deliver a greater catharsis that it winds up paradoxically finding that power in its execution all the same. An irony I know the band appreciates on some level. And while a project like this with these tones and these themes, it normally becomes a bit of a niche listen for me as much as I appreciate it, this is kind of catchy enough that I can easily go back to it all the same and experience that horror in little bite-sized chunks. So yeah, 9 out of 10, incredible listen, absolutely worth all the praise it's receiving. Again, not like the last album I gave 9 out of 10, it's not for everybody, even those who like industrial music and noise rock, but oh yeah, it's worth it. Definitely check this out. It's something else. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know, a little late to the punch with this one. Really wanted to give it its time and get it taken in, and again, it's some one hell of a listen, but yeah, definitely worth it. This stuff kicks ass. But yeah, if you want to buy or stream the album, links down there below. Got the poll up there if you guys want to actually dig in and really agree with me, because I haven't seen a lot of critics come down on this, or really a lot of audiences disliking it. It is something to behold. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my schedule, so I could have covered this earlier, or help support the channel, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys can vote for my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right there. If you want to see my schedule, it's on my Instagram, link down there below. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.